Hey everyone, it's Thursday and I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Janice Amiro and I am a holistic nutritional consultant and a holistic cancer coach. And back in December of last year, I decided that I wanted to talk to my audience and have them just help my audience get more information on how they can help themselves. So I decided to do regular interviews and interview some people of other health modalities, and also some people who have gone through a health crisis like I have, or I had. And so that brings me to my guest today. Hi, Carmen.
Hi, Janice. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day and to join me. So I wanted to bring Carmen on. I met Carmen, I think it was in 2018. I'm not really sure. And yeah, and
Around there.
around there. And I'm not really sure how we connected, but we had a meeting. We met up in Bridgewater with Summer. I remember that. And I learned a bit about what Carmen was all about. And we immediately, we realized we had lots in common because we'd both been through a major health crisis. And that's why Carmen is here today. I want to pick her brain and get her insight on so she can share what she did to help herself to manage her situation. So let's get started with some questions, Carmen.
Hey.
Great. So we were chatting a little bit earlier before we went live, and you told me something I'm going to ask you to share with the audience. You told me something about your childhood, your teenage years. So when did you first realize that food played a role in your health?
So I was in high school at the time. I had issues off and on with eczema since childhood. I remember my mom saying I was little and could barely talk and but I had eczema on my arms and things, and I was at the doctor's one day and he asked what was going on, and I said that I felt like I had little ants crawling under
Oh,
my skin.
oh no.
So, but then, it got better as I got older. But then in high school, I'm not sure what triggered it exactly, if it was environmental, maybe that I started using makeup and things like that that was on my skin. But I started having issues with eczema again, and specifically around my eyes. So I looked like a raccoon for a few months, or maybe like a whole year. It was really red around my eyes and irritated. So at the time, I visited a naturopath for the first time, and it was suggested that I should start looking at my diet and what was in it and what could maybe be taken out of it that could maybe make a difference. And that was a long time ago. So it did get better, but I don't remember exactly, what I did at the time. But I think it was the first time that it really opened my eyes to the idea that, the food that I was eating could have an effect on, my physical self. So
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So fast forward to a few years later, you were diagnosed with a condition, and can you tell us when that was and what it was all about, and what symptoms you noticed that took you to getting tests and finding out what was going on?
yeah. So about 4 years ago is when I started seeing doctors and got diagnosis. But I had noticed little things for a few years. So there's one thing that was happening, and I only realized after the diagnosis that it was linked, and it was related to my voice. My voice would get I would get hoarseness, And at the time I was singing a lot. I was working in the day and I had, musical groups and bands. We would play music. And for a few summers, we played pretty much 4, 5, 6 nights a week for tourists and stuff. And we'd play music and sing for 2 hours. And, and sometimes on stage at night and everything. And I started noticing that, I would start losing my voice and having a hard time singing towards the end, but didn't realize, I thought it was just singing so much that it was,
Right.
but then I started having issues with swallowing. So I was having trouble swallowing at times. But it started maybe at this point, it started maybe 8, 9, even 10 years ago. And it would happen maybe once or twice a year. And then it was once or twice a month. And
Huh.
then when I decided to see my doctor about 4 years ago, it was happening about once a week. So I would just be eating, my lunch or my supper. And it was worse if I was eating things that, that clog up easily, like bread and pasta. And if you're not chewing it completely. So, and I would be completely fine. And all of a sudden I would swallow like once more. And I would feel like I couldn't swallow it.
Wow.
And it got worse and worse. And the feeling was just so upsetting when it would happen, because it's like you feel like you're going to stop breathing or what's going on. And I don't know why, but at one point someone passed me like a glass of milk, and I took, you know a quick drink and swallowed hard, and I really heard a pop. I could hear like a pop, like if it cleared, and then it was fine. But and if it happened in public, it's kind of, you feel uncomfortable and a bit embarrassed. And I remember one of the worst times I was at a lunch, a work lunch with my staff, and it happened at the restaurant, and it was one of the worst times, and it hurt, and it just felt awful. And so I went to the bathroom hoping that it would kind of disappear and just go down like it always did. And one of my coworkers knocked on the door, and she said, "Are you okay? Can I do something?" And I said, "Get me a glass of milk," because it had worked that time, right? So I needed that one thing. And so she came, and I knew, like, just swallow hard. It was scary to swallow something else when you're already feeling like you're choking. And I heard like the biggest pop, and I think that was the moment I thought, okay, this doesn't feel normal anymore. It's not just me, because people would say, well, you're just maybe swallowed too fast, or you're eating too fast, or chew more. But at that point I realized maybe I should mention it to
Mhm.
my doctor. So I
So
saw my
what's the what's the name of the condition that we're talking about?
so there's two things that I got diagnosed with.
Okay, okay, go
So
ahead. Yeah,
yep. So I saw, and they're all related.
yeah.
So I went to see my family doctor, just a routine visit. We talked about everything else, my blood pressure, we checked everything that we always do. And then towards the end, I mentioned the swallowing. I said, I have one thing I really want to talk about. And I have this thing happen to me sometimes. And so, and I think one thing that's important is that because of my age, I wasn't really considered like someone that should be experiencing these things.
Mhm.
So it was a little bit overlooked at first. And I remember we just talked about what was happening and what could it be. And I was standing and I was at the door ready to leave, and thank you for listening. And my doctor said, "You know what? Come back. Come back in." She's like, "This is bothering me too. And I don't want to think in 10 years that we should have sent you to check what was going on in the throat at that time. So we're going to do a scope and see if something's going on." So, if I hadn't been so into what was going on, I might have just left and, you know,
Yeah,
waited
yeah.
for the next episode. So
Mm.
I went for a throat scope where they put the little video in, and they took biopsies. And I'm pretty sure I had my first diagnosis right there on the table. when everything was over, and the throat specialist said, uh, I have to tell you, you have this thing called, and it's hard to pronounce, but it's Schatzki ring. Schatzki ring. So SCHATZKI for anyone who's interested, because I've had people mention to me since I've had that same thing happen to me about swallowing, and they want to know more. So it's a Schatzki ring, and what it is, it's just a ring of tissue that develops in your esophagus at one place. So at this one certain place, it had narrowed. So the passage was narrowed. And she said, I took extra biopsies around there on purpose so that it clears it. And she said, you should start feeling better right away. So I was so relieved. I thought, that's it. That's what I had. That's it. It was that tissue thing. And sure enough, as soon as I went back home, got back to my life, I stopped experiencing this issues with swallowing. And I mean, I could eat like a piece of bread and pasta, and I was almost scared, to try it again, and it was totally
Yeah.
clear. And so, but they had sent the biopsy for testing. She said, we'll send it anyway, but it looks like this is it. You had that ring and we fixed it, and you should be good. But then 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a call from the throat specialist, and she said, I know we talked about your Schwarzy ring, and that we thought it was that, but I have bad news about your biopsy. It came back, and so at that time I got the second diagnosis, which is the one that affected me the most, and it's a condition called Barrett's esophagus that I knew nothing about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that most people look at me, like, what is that when I mention it? So Barrett's esophagus, it's a condition that shows that cells have changed and that damage has been done in your esophagus. And it can also cause issues with swallowing. It's related to that ring too in certain times. But the funny thing is, well, I shouldn't say funny because I'm not the only one, but they don't know exactly what causes the Barrett's esophagus, but it's often related to problems with reflux and heartburn, which I wasn't really necessarily experiencing. I had reflux when I was pregnant the first time. I had heartburn maybe a few times in my life. I know when I was a baby, I had a lot of reflux with the milk, but then it went away. So it was surprising to hear that I had that.
Yeah.
And so it was a.
So I think that the next question, of course, would be, what did you do about it? Because you're here to talk about, the audience wants to know what you did to change or to try to change this situation. But so how did you feel, and how did it come to be that you decided to make some changes to your diet? So what were you feeling at that time of the diagnosis?
Well, it was definitely very upsetting because I thought I had the answer and that it was all clear and that I could focus on other things again, and that my health might be okay for a few years. But the thing that really made an impact on me is when, I was invited to go in the doctor's office and talk about this diagnosis. And I was told, okay, the biopsy shows that you have Barrett's esophagus. This is a condition that increases your risk for cancer for esophagus. And
Right.
you might have esophagus cancer now. So
Okay.
yeah. So that was, and it was a serious talk. It was a very serious talk in that office. And I felt really like shaken, it was kind of a wake up call, and it's a good thing. The way that I was spoken to was, you might have esophagus cancer already. We don't know. The biopsy was not able to tell us. So we have to send you again and start with that. And at the time, I had a 4-year-old. I had one son at the time, a 4-year-old, and the doctor said, I remember you mentioning that you were thinking about having a second one. And I said, yes. And she said, well, you're so young. You're like the youngest like that I've diagnosed with this in my office. And I usually tell my patients, which are usually, 80 years old, that they might develop cancer in 10 years. But she said, you're so young. Like I have that memory in my head, her voice yelling over and over, you're so young. And she said, and that's where it hit me, and I swallowed hard, is when she said, you might want to consider having a second child. Because in my mind, she was telling me, maybe you shouldn't have a second child. You might die in 5 years, or
Right,
you might
right.
leave him alone, or you might. And so it was definitely an eye opening experience. So that night, I came home and had a serious discussion with my husband. And because we were on our way to being 40 years old in a few years, and do we want a second child, and how does this diagnosis affect our feelings? And I had a chat with my mom, and moms are protective, and maybe you should rethink this. And that was a really hard decision, because we had just decided that we wanted a second one, and that we would try, and if it happened it did, and if not. So uh, the one thing that made the experience a little bit more personal and sensitive was that I was pregnant when I was in her office that day, but didn't
Wow,
know. I didn't
wow.
know. So at the time, we basically made the decision that maybe we should stop there. We had the one, and that we should focus on our health. And then I think it was only a week later that I missed my period and realized, oh my gosh, like I am pregnant.
Yeah,
So it was kind of exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time, because it was like, okay, there's a baby coming. The decision has been made for us ahead of time. And it made the whole thing a little bit more important, I think, for me, because
yeah.
like, okay, I have this diagnosis, I have this condition that we all have the risk of cancer. It's always there, but I have I have this knowledge now that I do have a condition that might push it to come in one place,
Mhm.
not counting what's going on in the rest of my body, and I have a baby coming.
Yeah,
So what
oh,
do I do?
right.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
So there's no cure, and I was told that the best thing that you can do is to manage the symptoms of reflux, because heartburn and reflux are what causes the damage and the changes in your
Right.
esophagus. So at the time, I was suggested um, medication that should be taken. So I was supposed to take, and I don't remember what kind, but it was some sort of puffer that I had to inhale and swallow. That was quite strong, and that medicine was supposed to heal some of the damage done in the esophagus, and start a medication that's for bad reflux and heartburn. I don't know the specific names, but they call those the PPIs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being pregnant, newly pregnant, I asked as many doctors as I could, what do you think about this? I asked the throat specialist. I asked my family doctor. I asked other doctors, what do you think about being pregnant and these medications? And they all said, we don't have enough information, enough studies, you know, not a lot of pregnant women will accept to do, studies that might endanger the baby. So they all said, we don't have enough studies to tell you that it's okay, that it's
Hmm.
100% okay. We don't feel that the medications are really, bad or strong enough, but we can't make the decision for you. So I, with my age and everything, I really did not want to take medication while I was pregnant.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that was the thing that made me look for other ways of taking care of myself. So at the time, it didn't take long. I booked an appointment with a naturopath to have a discussion with someone else about other options, and it all came to food. What could I do? What could I put in my mouth or not put in my mouth?
Yeah.
So and it was a journey, of going through like all the things that I wanted to change. But the first focus was the esophagus and the stomach. What types of foods irritate it? What type of foods, cause the acid reflux, and let's take them out so
Mhm.
that you're trying to clean your esophagus,
Yeah.
if
So
you
what
will.
are those foods, Carmen, that because I'm sure people want to know. There's a lot of people on PPIs. There's people who've been on reflux medication for 30, 40 years. And so what are the foods that you took away to try to shift the symptoms?
So the first things I started doing was really focused on the acid reflux. So I started looking at things like items with acidity, like if I eat tomatoes, if I eat, a lot of, citrusy food, does that affect me? Coffee. I was trying to just feel out if, I did feel at all, because if you remember, I didn't feel a lot of heartburn. So it was kind of like trying to figure out, reading up on the foods that would cause it, and kind of getting, really opening my eyes to what was happening in my throat. So even though I wasn't feeling the reflux, if I was having 3 or 4 coffees in a day, I would feel kind of extra mucusy and stuff. So, and if I
Mhm.
was, and dairy was a big one for me. If I was eating
Mhm.
too much dairy, I
Yeah.
would get extra mucus and maybe not heartburn, but I would feel like not okay in the esophagus. So I slowly started just trying to avoid processed food, fried foods, which, I was already doing anyway. But I noticed being sensitive to things like that. It would only take one time to eat out, in a restaurant and have fries or something, and I would get heartburn.
Yeah.
So when I was eating something like that, I would get heartburn instantly that night. So
Mhm.
I realized that those foods that I had to avoid even more.
Yes, that's right.
And I
Yeah.
don't remember what happened, because I had the baby, and all of a sudden I was on maternity, and I had to take a break from work, and think about my health. So I started uh reading a little bit more about it, and I don't know how it happened. I must have been like breastfeeding one day and just watching, looking for talk shows or something interesting to listen to. And one day I heard it was this show about what you can do to prevent cancer. And it was just, a day that I was feeling upset about the diagnosis and looking for ideas of what I could do, and not knowing, what the best answers were. And they introduced the plant-based lifestyle.
Mhm.
So it just, the way that they presented it, and I had heard testimonials about, how people were just feeling better,
Mhm.
genuinely better, with
Mhm.
eating less meat and dairy. And I just, when I get an idea that seems good for me, and if I get on board, I'm not a little bit on board. I'm 100% on
Right.
board.
Yeah.
So it sounded like it was a good option for me. And the
Mhm.
problem was at the time, because I just had my second baby. And I mean, we in my household, we had been, my husband and I had always tried to include all kinds of different foods, and try to be health conscious when we could. But then when life gets busy, things get in the way. And that week, I started looking at how we were eating, because we were like in a zone of a baby zone. One child at school, husband back to work full time, a baby, wake, like, and I was realizing that we were using the traditional methods to plan our meals. What's the meat? What's going to be the meat tonight? What are we eating? So we
Mhm.
would, choose, okay, beef, pork, or chicken. And then we might get to what's going to go, what's the starch or that's going to go along, potatoes, rice. And a lot of times I was noticing that we were so tired and busy that we never got to deciding what would be the vegetable or, the veggies and fruits. And so, we were eating a lot of plates that was just meat and potato or meat and rice.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
uh, so this idea of adding more plants and veggies made a lot of sense to me, and I just completely shifted my way of thinking. And
Mhm.
I started asking the question, what veggies would you like to eat today? So,
Yeah.
maybe it was something like, well, we haven't had Brussels sprouts in a long time. What could we do with it? And then what else could go with it?
Right, right, right.
And I started
So,
creating, yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that I started recreating my plates where at least half of it was greens and vegetables,
Yeah.
and the other half was the other items. And so it was less meat, less sugar, less processed food. So I mean, it was overwhelming to do too much, but that's what I was trying to do: less meat, less processed food, less sugar, more
Mhm.
veggies, and more plant-based proteins, because I didn't
Right.
grow up with that. But
No.
chickpeas, lentils, and it was fun to experience with
Yeah.
new things, being on maternity and,
Yeah.
having the time to be a little bit creative somewhere in the kitchen,
Mhm.
made it fun.
I like what you said, and I about half the plate was vegetables, and then the other half was, protein and a starch. And I mean, so many times when I start working with a client, I draw a circle and I cut it down the middle, and then one side I quarter and say, here's your veggies, this can be your protein, and this can be your starch. And oftentimes, like you said, it's a meal that is protein and starch, and often not great choices of protein and starch. And a lot of people don't have that veggie, or they have a very small portion. Or it's the garnish of the tomato and the lettuce on the burger that they count as their veggie. Yeah, yeah. So you basically, just looking at the clock, because I know you don't have a whole lot of time. We could talk for hours, but
I know.
yeah. So basically, you shifted gears into more plant-based eating, and so what did you notice? What were the benefits that you noticed, as
Yeah,
far as your overall health? Of course, with your diagnosis and the symptoms that, because you said you didn't have a whole lot of symptoms of the disease,
yeah.
but what did you notice about your health, as you started to shift into more
Mhm.
plant-based?
Yep. So that was like a really exciting, time for me because I went right into it. And I think for a month anyway, I pretty much tried a 95% plant-based lifestyle. And I just knew that, I had eaten, you know, I was focusing too much on meats for a while, and I just really wanted to shift there. So I tried that for about a month, and I would say, like, even after a week, I started feeling so good. It's hard to explain, and I keep saying it was like I felt like an energy bolt had hit me. That's how I felt, because it was, and the sun, because I felt just full of energy, happier. I had a lot more, energy and less pain. Like I'm 42, and so if I'm not eating well and stuff, and I just jumped into too much exercise, I'll feel it in my legs, or sometime at night if I'm sitting in a bad position all day at my desk job, then I'll feel it in my legs. And so all those little things, or even my stomach, always have a sensitive stomach. So, you know, all these little things that I was feeling in day to day, like maybe bloatness from something I ate, or pain in my legs from a position I was in that day, or headaches and things like that. I was not experiencing much of that. So
Right.
I think that realization that how I was feeling is what I focused on
Mm-hmm.
after that. I mean, I had different motivations, but the motivation to keep seeking answers and trying to stick to eating better was
Mm-hmm.
just feeling the way that I was feeling myself, feeling better myself. But
Mm-hmm.
then having this new baby in my life, uh, I think that was what changed over the years, because I always went to being conscious, eating certain ways and feeling certain ways. But then with the diagnosis and a baby, it was kind of like the motivation of staying alive and healthy
Yeah.
for my kids.
No kidding. So Carmen, it's already 11:30. So we've got a few more minutes.
Yeah, sure.
I want to ask you, well, a few questions, but so that was a few years ago. You made a lot of changes. You shifted your plate to be more green, let's say, and took away the processed foods and those foods that caused you some irritation here. So fast forward to now and the past couple of years, how have things been for you? I know you shared a little bit about, how COVID has impacted your family, and yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, that month that I was feeling, so good, uh, I thought that that feeling and the scare was enough to convince me to stay on this path 100% for the rest of my life. That's what I thought. And I was experiencing challenges and still staying on top of things. I was figuring out how to eat, if we went to restaurants, or, I was figuring out that, if I went to a barbecue, the only thing that I could eat was possibly the salad, and it wasn't enough. So what can I add to it so that I'm, still feeling full? So I would bring little bags of seeds and nuts to like throw in the salad. I was doing really good, but then COVID hit, and everybody was, experienced it in different ways. But my husband and I at the time were both working full-time jobs. At that time the baby was in daycare and our oldest was in school. So it was like overnight we were forced to start working from home with two kids at home, which was pretty much impossible. It worked for a few days, for a few weeks, but after a few months, it really took a toll on the whole family dynamics, how we were feeling. Uh, I mean, we had an 18-year-old at the time. That first lockdown, the baby was 18 months old,
Adult, yeah.
needed a lot of help and attention. And then the oldest was in grade 1, I think, at the time, so homeschooling. So there's no way that we had to take our turns to be with the kids, do homeschooling. And a lot of time I was working my hours after the kids were gone to bed, so from 9 to 11 sometimes, and all the weekends. So I was not catching up, and I started just losing completely control of decisions. So that was a setback for me that I didn't expect. I
Mhm.
went back to older ways on some days just because it was easier. I would eat what we had made for the kids, spaghetti and meatball, and just not go the extra length to add those things that I was. So, and I mean, as soon as I start eating terrible, even for a day or two, I feel it.
Mm,
So,
mm.
I realize now that it's something that you always have to stay on top of and try to surround yourself with, people you can talk to about it, and
Mhm.
just resources where you can keep being remembered of what you're doing, or the choices that you want to take. But
So you found that you had a bit of a setback. Did you go back to what you were eating before you changed your diet? Did you go back 100%? Did you go back to eating no, okay.
No, I mean, I was just a little bit, it was just, I was maybe a little less strict. And there, yes, there are some things that I ate in the last, since COVID, that I wasn't eating anymore, like a Halloween candy from the kids. Because it's just, it's right there, they're giving it to you. And so it's just being tired and just letting what's happening around you happen
Hmm.
and not intervening, that was the thing. But I never stopped. It's more that I ate some things that I would not have, uh and but I still kept cooking the new things.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So, all the new recipes and the lentils and the chickpeas and that I introduced, I was
Yeah.
still,
Yeah. Good. So you didn't go back completely. So I want to talk too about your recently you've made a few decisions, but you talked a little bit about um, when we had a quick chat about some good news you've had with some test results lately.
yeah. So, and I've had another hard month not too long ago, and I had another cancer scare. So the same time that I was due for a scope, because of the Barrett's esophagus diagnosis, I get scopes yearly. When they're clear, sometimes they wait 2 years. So nothing had changed. I had waited until I could go and have medication and everything. I was done with breastfeeding and things like that to go for my next scope. Nothing had changed. So they had decided to wait 2 years this time, which that already bothered me because I really wanted to know how
Yeah.
things were developing, right?
Yeah.
So recently I was due for my scope to see if things had changed or, other things had developed. And at the same time, I got news from a mammogram that there was something that was suspicious. So within 2 weeks, I think I had the scope, two mammograms. It was still unclear. I needed a biopsy. There was maybe something there. So in the same week, I was waiting to see what was going on from my scope and if I had breast cancer now.
Oh,
So
that's a lot. That's a lot on your plate.
it is, and I think it's important to talk about because it's not, it's you don't. For me, it's not about waiting for someone to have cancer to talk about it because the whole
Mhm.
process is, a big thing. And why not make changes before the diagnosis if
Great.
you can,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I got a phone call from the throat specialist about my scope, and she said, um, and there's one thing I told her, I'm not comfortable taking the medication.
Hmm.
How are you doing? When I went for the scope, and I said, I'm not comfortable taking the medication. It says it causes cancer
Oh my God.
if you take it for too long.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you told me I'm young. I might have a lot of years to live, maybe. So I
Yeah.
said, that bothers me. And she said, yeah, but if you don't take it, the Barrett's esophagus will cause cancer. I was
Right.
like, oh, this is like, how do you decide what to do? So she said, I said, is there any possibility of taking a break from it and restarting, or are there options like that? And she said the only way I could see someone taking off the medication is if the Barrett's esophagus disappears, which it normally doesn't. Anyway, so she called me and she said, I have the result from your scope, and from the biopsies we took, there's no sign of Barrett's esophagus.
Wow. Wow.
So I said, really? And she said, well, it doesn't mean that it's not there. So, we're not going to get too excited, but it was still a big relief because
Yeah.
I was waiting for her to say it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And so I said, wow, I started thinking that maybe the changes I made had an impact. That's what I want to think anyway, because it's, positive thinking,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
has an impact. But she said, maybe if I had taken the biopsy further down, it would have showed. And she said, I still see all the signs of the damage and the from the reflux and
Mm-hmm.
all that. So we still have to really, So we still have to keep you on the medication. We still want to, try to take care of the esophagus and see what's happening. But that was maybe another reason to be motivated again.
Right.
Because
Right.
I keep telling myself, well, what if I put my energy in the food healing me again? And what if next time there's still no sign of it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then
Mm-hmm.
maybe then I can, stop taking the medication for a while until it's back, if
Mm-hmm.
it does come back.
If it
So
does come back, yeah.
that is super exciting to me to think that maybe I can get there
Mm-hmm.
where my doctor will also say that it's okay that I get off the medication for a while,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
just that's taking the medication is scary too, right?
Yeah, it can cause some problems, like you said. So at this point, you've had some positive news, and you're now motivated to continue to go kind of in a prevention mode. Is that kind of what you're thinking about?
Yeah, and I mean, I to me, knowledge is helps, you know. I don't want to just guess what I should do or what's the right things to to eat. So when I was on maternity, I had to go 100% all out, and I took a plant-based. I have a plant-based certificate from Cornell University. I went and took a program. It was 6 courses. It was eye-opening. I learned a lot of things. And what really stayed with me the most, and this is what motivated me to want to inspire others, is
Mm-hmm.
the course, there's one course specifically. We talked about it a lot in the other courses, but there was one specific course we talked a lot about, changing the way you eat to prevent and even reverse medical conditions. I
Absolutely.
couldn't believe the
Yeah.
stories I was hearing from people who really lived reversing their heart problems, their
Yeah.
cancer.
Yeah.
It was really eye opening. So, and all the conditions they were talking about, I thought, wow, they're really talking about my hometown. Most problems that are the most common
Yeah.
are heart disease and blood pressure
Yeah.
and things like that. So
That's
uh,
right.
that's what motivated me to want to share, some of my experiences and my salad recipes and things like that.
Yeah, I just got Rose said, thanks for the thank you, Janice and Carmen. Great to hear about the journey. And Carmen, thanks for all the fantastic recipes you've shared for us. And for those of you that don't know, Carmen decided to post a salad recipe every week for the year last year. And so I have shared a lot of those, you know. But I have to say, just when you were talking about prevention, as you know, because you have my book, and this is what this book is all about, is about stories of how people reversed a situation. So you're one of those people who is on the road to doing that. And so I want to ask you, what is your so what are you going to be doing moving forward now? You've learned a lot. I love some of those books behind you that you have books by my favorite people there. And so what have you made a decision to do, looking at January 1st, like we all do, and making some changes? What are your thoughts, and what are you ready to do in the new year to help you get to that point of, well, practicing prevention, and perhaps seeing good test results going forward, and less medication, and a healthier Carmen? What's your plan?
So another setback for me was going back to work full time after the maternity. So when I was on maternity, I focused all my attention on health and taking that course. I got a lot of knowledge, and that, made me really confident in the choices I was making because I had the knowledge. But, being at my age and with little kids, my brain has a hard time, keeping up. I forget things. things that I learned years ago, like it's so easy to forget. So yeah, one setback was just going back to a busy life, a busy work life with kids who have needs. I mean, I'm on the go with them from 6 in the morning until 9 o'clock when they're gone to bed, and I don't have a lot of time to myself to think. And so I was feeling that setback plus the setback of COVID. I kept thinking that things were going to shift again on its own, and I was going to find time, but I wasn't. So it got me thinking, and I thought, okay, you got to kick yourself, again, to because I need challenges. I need challenges, and I need to be accountable to stay on top of it. And because I always loved our conversations and loved where we were going, I thought it just makes sense. I want to be coached by Janice in the new year.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
lost touch with the information, and I don't have time to watch the documentaries and read the books right now again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't have a lot of people that I talk about this with. I'm very fortunate to have a husband who will try and eat and loves mostly what I cook, and is very supportive about my lifestyle and the way I want to eat. But talk about all the whole issues behind it, and really like talk about the ingredients, that's missing from my life. So I think it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be really eye-opening again, and what I need to be a little bit more serious about it again.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly looking forward to our conversations because, as you know, I love talking about food. And so I think it's going to be a win-win for both of us. But is there anything that we've been talking for 47 minutes, imagine. Is there anything that you would like to, any final thoughts that you have? I do want to say, or maybe you can tell people, your salads are still up on your site, I think. So maybe you can tell people how to access the salads that you've created, those gorgeous salads. I mean, the colors. And I have one friend.
And and it's important to mention that it was, to me, it was really not just salads. Every recipe that I created was created so that I transform a salad into a balanced, full plant-based meal. Because as
Absolutely.
you remember, I said that in restaurants and barbecues and family gatherings, a lot of times the only thing that I thought I could eat was the salad, which
Mm,
was usually just greens.
yeah,
And that wasn't enough to keep me feeling well.
no.
So that's why I had made myself the challenge of creating salad recipes that felt like, and some of them took a long time to prepare, just like a meal would. Because I
Hmm.
would prepare the chickpeas just like I would a meat with a sauce and or in
Hmm.
the oven. And there was a lot of components. And I really wanted to help other people get the idea that, you could treat a salad as a meal that you're preparing and enjoy, all the elements of it. And
Yeah.
yeah, getting inspired by that. So uh, I started posting some of them, and friends said you should share a few recipes, and I just like, kind of as a joke, I think one night it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I said, well, if 50 people say that I should do this before midnight, then I'll share a recipe every week for the whole year.
Yeah.
And I think 100 people said do it, like within an hour or two. I'm like, oh, I guess I created myself but it was a really good challenge for me, in that I finished it after the year. But the page is still up. It's a Facebook page, and the title is in French: Salade saine et satisfaisante, which is healthy and satisfying
Right. Right.
salad. So that can still be searched.
Yeah.
And now my new page is, I haven't been super active on, but I hope to be a little bit more in the new year and share more recipes, not just salad, but a lot of my favorite recipes now. Is Zener Joy, which
Hmm.
I have a Facebook and a Instagram account. So
Hmm. I'll post those in the link
yeah,
in the comments today. for people who want to have a look. And I like that you meant, you made a point of saying that those salads are not lettuce, tomato, and cucumber. Those are meals. Those are hearty, dense, nutrient dense meals that are balanced, that will support good health, support, their fuel that we need. They supply the fuel for the body. Yeah. Any closing things you'd like to add, Carmen, and before we say goodbye today?
Well, I guess it's just that I think that it's that people that we should just not be scared to ask for help, or look for coaching when when we're not sure where to turn to in the
Mhm,
nutrition world, and to
mhm,
realize that I love my doctor. There's a lot of things that I need her for, but she doesn't have time to sit down a whole day with me. We all have so many things to do, so it's sometimes it's nice to have a whole family and different people that you talk with to
mhm.
try to get uh, answers for your complete better self. And one question you had asked me earlier that I don't think we talked about much is, what are the challenges? And to me, it was just all the misinformation that's out there,
Mm,
and the lack of available healthy foods. Uh, I don't eat in restaurants much, and I would love to, but there's not a lot of options that follow you know, what the way that I want to eat. So, yeah, I think that I hope that in the years to come that I keep finding ways to just have a positive impact, and not only work on myself, but hopefully inspire others to make a difference, or dare to try something new, uh,
mhm.
and realize that they feel better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're living proof that you can change things, first of all, and that you can see results. And also that it's not always easy. You took a couple of steps back, but then you regrouped, and now you're planning on finding support. And so if you recognize you need the accountability, then that's what you've done for yourself, because you want to continue this lifestyle to hopefully age well and live a long life, so and see your great grandchildren. So thank you so much for joining me today. And for those of you who are listening, I think Carmen will be having more of an active presence in her group in the new year, and talking um, about nutrition and her challenges and what's working for her, and just general information. So I look forward to seeing that as well, Carmen.
Great. Thank you
Thank you.
again.
Thank you so much. My name is Janice Amiro, and I am a holistic nutritionist. And if anyone would like if you have a question or would like me to talk about a certain topic on the show, then just let me know. You can reach me on Facebook or janiceamiro.com. And have a great Thursday, everyone. We'll see you next week. So bye for now. Bye.